I would love it if we stopped thinking of just the biology of sleep. Like, oh, I need to make sure I sleep enough and I'm getting the right number for my deep sleep and my light sleep and my REM sleep. The smart wake up is getting into that because we're noting that even if we've slept enough, the ride out, if you time it right, is much better. Timing is everything. I mean, the same, we can relate to this in our, the consciousness of our days. You catch us at a good moment and things are great. Catch us at a wrong moment and, the angry tiger could be there. So there is an element of like finding the right moments in the wave, to give ourselves the push. So I think, thinking about the holistic toolkit, the bare minimum in my mind is the, help you get to sleep, deepen your sleep, and then wake you up at the right time. So I think that's the basics of that design your sleep architectures.
Okay, welcome back, guys. I'm Nadia. I'm the CMO here at Muse. We have Chris, who's a co-founder and CIO, and we also have Maurice, who is our senior research scientist here at Muse. And we're back for another session on why we made this. Because we are launching a new sleep feature, which is very exciting. That is kind of the cherry on top to our sleep toolkit. And it's called Smart Wakeup. And Smart Wakeup essentially is a responsive, personalized wake up tool that is able to wake your brain up at the optimal time. So let's get into it. Pretty cool feature. Chris, your alarm goes off. You feel terrible. Why? Why do you wake up and you feel bad?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the first thing that someone should think about when understanding what's going on here is that when we sleep, not all of our time asleep is the same thing. So I think most people now have been introduced to this idea of sleep stages. Like we have deep sleep, we have a light sleep, we have got REM sleep, and the brain is doing different things in these different stages. And how we feel upon waking has a lot to do with what stage we're waking up from. So I think most of us have experienced being woken up from deep sleep. And this is like kind of a far out experience. It feels like you're being pulled out of the deepest ocean. And it can be extremely disorienting. And usually you feel pretty bad when that happens. And people are not happy when they get woken up from this state. So that's an example of as bad as it can be, being woken up from deep sleep. And it's quite hard to do, thankfully. If you have a little noise in the bedroom, it's not going to wake you up in deep sleep because we're pretty tuned out in that stage. But these different stages, they all manifest with different feelings in our bodies and energetically when we wake up. And when we think about our sleep, if we've used a sleep tracker, like if you've used Muse to track your sleep, you'll see that there's a pattern that we go through throughout the night. And we call that pattern sleep cycles because we go through sleep stages. It takes about 90 minutes, but it's not a fixed quantity. It depends a lot. And then you'll go through cycle after cycle as the night goes on. So, there's a pretty good chance that your alarm, which doesn't have any idea what's happening in your sleep, is waking you up at an inopportune time. And even if you could time it just right, there's another factor, which is every day we have a circadian cycle that also is causing changes in our sleep architecture every night. And our circadian cycle shifts at a different rate than the days go by. And so if you look at someone's sleep, what you'll see is that that opportune time to wake up is changing every single day. So you can't even really get accustomed to one thing with practice. In reality, our cycle is always shifting. So if we wanted to wake up at those right times to feel the best, you'd have to really be sensitive to what's happening in each moment while you're sleeping.
I mean, there's several variables you just said, right? So not only waking you up given where you are in your sleep cycle at that time and timing that correctly, but also the circadian shifts that we experience. Sounds complex. So what made you believe that this was a solvable problem as opposed to our dumb alarms right now, as that just you set a time and it wakes you up, doesn't care about those
Mhm.
variables.
Well, thankfully, we have some amazing new technology that's able to read the brain and know what's happening from moment to moment while we're sleeping. Hey, look at that. That's one of those
Is it
magical devices.
is this the technology? So tell me about what made you be like, this technology is perfect for this problem solution.
Well, I think we have a lot to be thankful for because a lot of things have happened in technology to make this possible. So it wasn't just the creation of a Muse technology, it's the creation of many things, not the least of which is the AI technologies that are rapidly changing the landscape of our world right now. And that is, if you want to know how the brain is changing in its state from moment to moment, you need to be able to interpret what your measurements are telling you about the brain. And so there's different ways to measure the brain. The Muse primarily for sleep uses EEG, which is electroencephalography. This is measuring the electric field that the brain produces. And in there, we see things, that are very much characteristics of sleep, like slow wave activity, which you actually see at no other point during the day. So we read the brain's electrical activity, we can know exactly what's happening from moment to moment. And the thing about a smart wake up, a smart alarm, something which is trying to get you up at the right time is you need to be quite precise about those moments. A few minutes can make a big difference.
Right.
Uh, so, so I think that one of the big enabling technological shifts here is that number one, we can make really high quality brain measurements in bed at home. And then we also have the AI technologies and these nice compact computing platforms that can actually run these models. So you can actually create this closed loop relationship between your own brain activity and a stimulus, like getting you up in the right way. So it's just like many technologies that have evolved that allowed us to do this, but it really comes down to very accurate detection of what state the brain is in, and then also being able to make that assessment in a very timely way. So knowing exactly when it happened.
Right. Okay, because in going back to this idea that, you can get ripped out of sleep at the wrong stage or the wrong time and
Mhm.
really experience this grogginess.
Mhm.
And I'm sure, yeah, I was even reflecting when you were like, everyone's felt this. And I was like, I've had times where I've been ripped out of dreams. And I'm like, I wait. And in the dream, my partner is wronging me in some way. And I wake up and I'm mad at them, like emotionally mad. And so I'm groggy and emotionally mad that they've like ate my lunch or something that they shouldn't have.
A pretty mean
But
combination.
yeah, it's a bad combo. Okay, but this grogginess, this like this being ripped out of a brain state that isn't quite ready to be woken up. There's a
Mhm.
name for it. So Maurice, what is that and why does it happen?
Yeah, good question. And there is a name for it. It's actually a scientific term for it called sleep inertia. And again, it's not just about feeling tired. Like we've all experienced it for sure. Like, that feeling you want to sleep more. You don't understand what's going on. I usually tend to experience it a lot when I have like an early morning flight and I set like
Yeah.
5 alarms. I need to wake up at like 3 a.m. in the morning. And you're slow to react, think, and actually you wouldn't be in your best mood when you wake up. Yeah, it's called sleep inertia, and it actually happens a lot when you wake up at a time where you either shouldn't be waking up at that time, or either you don't want to wake up at that time, either because you haven't slept enough, like in case of an early morning flight, or as Chris also mentioned, if you woke up from the wrong sleep state, like when you're too deep in your sleep and you're waking up from that state. And yeah, this feeling can last actually like 30 to 60 minutes, and in
Okay.
some extreme cases to 2 hours, especially if you have been sleep deprived. And also in some cases, sometimes you don't even remember what's happening in the morning when you wake up from really, really strong sleep inertia. And some people call this sleep drunkenness, like you're kind of drunk in the morning. And this happens because when you wake up from deep sleep, you need time for your brain to start waking up. You ask, why is this happening? You need time, and especially for your prefrontal cortex, it needs time for your brain to start waking up. But if you wake up from a lighter sleep, you tend to experience sleep inertia less. That's why I think that having control over which sleep stage you wake up from can be a really, really good, powerful way to reduce sleep inertia and wake up feeling better. I hope
Got
that
it.
answers the question.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. And I mean it's challenging, right? Because you can go to sleep, set up your sleep, have your good sleep hygiene, making sure you're getting your 8 hours even if you have an early morning flight, set yourself up for success. But then if you're not if your alarm isn't sensing the right time to wake you up and you're still being ripped out of that that deeper sleep stage, you're still going to feel this sleep inertia or this grogginess, which is interesting because when I think about like what is important, one is I want to have enough sleep so that I'm getting the recovery process that my brain and my body needs, but I also want to feel good when I wake up. And then I also think about how it makes sense for when you're on vacation or when you have the luxury of not setting an alarm and your body naturally waking up at the time that it would like to wake up at, how good that can feel.
The best feeling.
Yeah, right? And so I think that it could be really powerful to be able to access that. And ultimately, that's why we created this feature. So, Maurice, Chris touched upon this a little bit earlier, but could you walk us through what a night of sleep actually looks like in your brain?
Yeah, sure. So, Chris talked about that, and like, let's say you zoom out and you want to take a bird's eye view of your full night of sleep. So, what you're going to see is basically your brain moving through a highly structured series of cycles that are roughly 90 minutes, as Chris said. So, during each of these 90-minute cycles, you're going to descend through light sleep, which we call also stage N1 and N2. Then you're going to go into deep sleep, or N3. And then you go back up to REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. And also, it's a bit also like nuance, because the way you cycle through these phases differ between the first half of the night and the second half of the night. So in the first half of the night, your brain is going to prioritize deep sleep. So deep sleep actually heavily dominates the first half of the night. And that is actually when your brain is doing more of the heavy lifting, physical recovery, immune system regulation, consolidating memory. And then REM sleep will start to dominate your second half of the night. And REM sleep is that active dreaming phase, which is actually very, very important for emotional processing, complex learning, and creativity. And during those cycles, but especially after you finish one of those cycles, there are these brief, distinct windows when you go into very light sleep. You can call these arousals, and they are characterized by abrupt changes in your brainwave oscillations at certain frequencies that you can actually see with an EEG device, but they are not necessarily accompanied by any movement or heart rate changes.
Mm,
And yeah, also I might add to that even though you do cycle every 90 minutes, not everyone cycles the same way.
right.
And the way you cycle also depends a lot on what you've done prior to going to sleep.
And your age, right?
Yeah, your age for sure. Like, it's very natural for sleep architecture to shift as a person's age. In fact, we tend to spend significantly less time in deep sleep as you age. And also, sleep becomes a bit more fragmented with more of these brief, frequent awakenings during sleep. And there's a line of research that I'm actually a bit passionate about, is that there's research going on that can actually look at your night's sleep and try to estimate based on how you slept, what's your age.
Oh, love
And
it.
yeah, some people call that brain age. And they've been found that if they estimate your brain age and take how much that age deviates from your actual age, they could tell a lot of things about the person and how they slept and how they're feeling. So it's pretty cool line of research.
And probably like if they have a newborn child.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
Chris, so this idea of these cycles, right? We have these 90-minute cycles on average that happen a couple times throughout our sleep that basically encapsulate all of the different sleep stages. That changes and the architecture of it changes depending on our circumstances as well as our age. Why do we have the cycles? Why do you think the cycles are a part of our sleep architecture? What do they serve as a function?
Yeah. So I think one thing which is worth saying also is that, we've been saying 90 minutes a lot, and this is like a really nice textbook simplification. And if you've ever tracked your sleep, you know that it's all
Yeah,
over the
that's going to
place,
be variable.
right? So it really depends on so many factors. And, I don't think we know half of them or how they impact your
Yeah.
sleep yet. So it's very active research, still just trying to understand the how and whys of our sleep and its features. And I think that's also part of the answer, to your question And that is, there's an element here where there are theories, but we don't really know the full answer yet. I think something which is important is that is sort of pretty easy to wrap your head around is there could be different kinds of things the brain needs to do to recuperate. And so deep sleep is like the deep clean power wash cycle. And in order to do that, and this is really about like clearing waste material, bringing, replenishing the neurotransmitters, these sort of things. And the how the brain does that is something that would conflict with other brain usage. So you kind of have to like turn the power off to do this procedure, which is also, Maurice was talking about sleep inertia. Like our brain doesn't change state immediately. Like even when we fall asleep progressively. That's why we kind of go through this sort of trippy experience in the falling asleep process. Our brain falls asleep in parts. And so it doesn't happen all at once. And just like our bodies, if you've done any sports, it's important to warm up. You can't just like jump off the couch and expect to be performing well. And our brain's the same way. It takes time to change states. And so when you wake up in the morning, you're feeling, in your mind and body, a remnant of what was just happening. And so if you wake up from deep sleep, it feels awful because you're in the middle of a power wash cycle. All the power was off, and all of a sudden you're trying to cope with reality and it doesn't work, right? Because you were like in full like shutdown mode. So I think there's different kinds of sleep that we need for different reasons. We know that for REM sleep, that the emotional processing we're doing is really important to reset our emotions, to process things and to reset our emotions for the next day. And this is why actually, so when you wake up in the morning with an alarm, one of the most common experiences you have with not feeling good is actually waking up out of your REM cycle. And what's going on here is if you can imagine you're in the middle of your, nightly emotional therapeutic session and you wake up, you are going to feel the remnants of that in your body as well. So you're changing state and you could be changing from a state where it's harder to shift. And also you're going to have the remnants of all the emotions that were going on at that point in your sleep. Thankfully, as Maurice said, our deep sleep is earlier in the night. So we don't really normally experience waking up out of deep sleep and having that terrible, like, just got out of the pool and I don't know how to walk on land experience. Because that would happen if you set your alarm like 2 hours after going to sleep, as an example, like that could happen. So we don't often experience that. So it's more of kind of missing the beat on, are you waking up in REM in this transition point that Maurice talked about. So hitting that right. And so like back to this kind of like cycle idea, I think another really interesting concept is that when we go to sleep, it's quite a vulnerable state. We are unconscious and the world's just going on around us.
It's
And
kind of
so
wild.
it is kind of wild.
Yeah.
And, if you have a very young child, there is an element of needing to be aware, having a situational awareness throughout the night. And so because we sleep in these parcels, like if you're in deep sleep, I mean, the house could be burning down. It's very hard to be woken up. But because we sleep in these cycles, there's a moment after each cycle where we become aware of our situation. We're in that light sleep state. We're semi-conscious. Our senses are quite attuned. We're very nearly awake. Like if you find yourself waking up at that moment, you're kind of ready to go. You can just
So it's
jump
kind
up.
of like an evolutionary survival potentially situation. Like, okay, going through the cycle, checking out if things are all right. No one's trying to eat me. Perfect. Okay, let's get back to it kind of thing.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
makes
I mean,
sense.
that's how I would read like the driving evolutionary factor of why we have our sleep in cycles like this, where it's sort of fragmented in these bits so that we can actually get what we need done, but not be too vulnerably exposed because we are like too unconscious for too long and not sensitive to what could be going on around us.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, so we have this idea that we go through these cycles throughout our sleep journey. The cycles can look different night by night, and they can change in length and duration based on our age, etc. We have this idea where if we are being ripped out of the wrong cycle at the wrong time, that can lead to sleep inertia and waking up feeling groggy.
Mhm.
So there are these natural windows of opportunity that occur where we're at lighter and deeper sleep and where the brain is closer to waking and less close to waking. So, how does EEG let us see those windows in real time? And I guess also, like, what would we miss without doing that? We've covered that a little bit, but I'm curious on covering that one more time in a succinct way.
I'm going to start by saying that all these sleep stages that we are talking about, they are all defined by your brain waves. So they are all defined by EEG. So the only way to really accurately detect these stages is by looking at your EEG. This is what happens when you actually go to a sleep clinic and you want to do a sleep study. Is you undergo something called polysomnography, where a sleep tech is basically going to look at your brainwaves and then assign for every 30-second a sleep stage based on what they see in the EEG. In fact, each stage is defined and identified by certain landmarks in your brainwaves. For example, during N3, you have the slow waves. During that hypnagogic state, you can see your alpha power going down. In this N2 stage, you have spindles and K complexes. So to be able to identify the stages, you need EEG. Same thing, in order to identify these small brief windows, these arousals that I mentioned before, you also need EEG because it's not just about movement and heart rate. They're like, now, how do other wearables are able to detect these sleep stages? Well, also as you cycle through these sleep stages, you also undergo, your body is basically undergoing changes as well. So your heart rate changes, your movements changes. So in REM, for example, you don't move because you don't want to act out your dream. It's kind of like your muscles shut down. So you can kind of estimate what sleep stage you're in. And these wearables, they're actually pretty decent at identifying whether you're asleep or awake. But again, these are just proxies for your sleep. It is only by looking at the brain and at the source that you can really know exactly where you are, especially when it comes to distinguishing between N2 and N3 or catching that brief transition to N1, which is exactly what you need to be able to wake up at the right moment.
Other sleep wearables essentially use proxy metrics to
Mhm,
be able to determine with high accuracy
mhm.
which sleep stage you're in. But if you're going to try to develop an intervention,
Yeah.
like we have done here with Smart Wakeup, to be
Mhm.
able to precisely time and intervene in that wake up window opportunity, you need to be dependent on EEG.
That is correct, because you need to be very accurate and you also need to be very fast, because this is not just about tracking your sleep. This is about really being as accurate as you can and making sure that you are woken up in the lighter stages of sleep. Because you could analyze trends with a less accurate device, so you can look at trends. But if you really want to wake up at the correct moment, you need to have that accuracy, because if the staging is wrong, you can wake someone up from deep sleep, and this actually might be even worse than waking up from with a normal alarm. So you don't want that.
Right. Okay. So at what point in time, Chris, did the team say we need to work on a feature that helps wake up people better? And where did the idea come from?
We've wanted to do this for an awfully long time. I think it's super cool that we have a technology now that can monitor our state while we are unconscious to the world. And
Mm.
so, it's like sleep is one of those things where we really don't have a tool or have not had a tool where we can actually start to intervene with, how we're sleeping, except having a partner in bed, which is also very interesting. We've never had the ability to try to like bring some engineering or design to how we sleep. And I think that's really the promise of wearable sensing and really good AI tech, is because there's an opportunity now to sort of take the engineering design approach to something which we weren't able to touch before because we didn't have something that could monitor us while we were unconscious, unless you went to a lab or something. So I think that's like, as soon as we knew that we could monitor sleep accurately as a human could, that really was the turning point of us saying all of these magical things that we've wanted to be able to explore, they're now possible. And so, I mean, there is so much to explore. And I feel very happy that we, have created something that's useful and it's making what we already are trying to do better, like to sleep better. But we're at just the beginning of the journey. There is like so much that we're going to discover and be able to take a more wise and informed approach to. These are early days. So it's very cool that like already, even like going from like nothing to something is a meaningful step. We have to remember that this kind of like closed loop intervention with sleep is a totally new adventure for humanity. So I think that like did I know that we'd be able to do something that would actually be useful? I had a strong feeling that we could, but we're playing with something new here. And so, I mean, as a researcher, that's terribly exciting. And also as a human being that gets to try these things, it's super cool because we're just like, walking through the portal and we're in, you're in a new wonderland. So anyway, so I think like there's you know, an excitement for me that really was started a long time ago of, wow, we can properly measure sleep. Look at all the things we could do if we figure it out, you know?
Totally. Anytime we do feature development, it's often very user led. So, what are the key user pain points that we're trying to address with our technology? And that's where we started with users having a hard time falling asleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, our very first sleep intervention and sleep tool was Sleep Assist, which is our device being able to support users turning their brain off at night with responsive audio cues to kind of wind them down.
Mm-hmm.
From then, we were like, okay, that went really well and it's making a meaningful impact in people's lives. What else do people have an issue with? It's the during the night. So either they're waking up in the night and they need support falling asleep again, but also deep sleep. Are we able to support them in getting more deep sleep? Hence, deep sleep boost. And then from there, I mean, you've always been very keen on making sure we're looking at sleep as a holistic process. And so we knew that that wasn't the end of the sleep arc. There's this moment and this opportunity of when we wake up and how someone feels when they wake up. And it's probably lower on the totem pole kind of problem area that people think of because there hasn't been solutions that can actively address how someone wakes up. And there's many things that go into how someone feels physically when they wake up. And that's kind of why we started with Sleep Assist, moved to Deep Sleep Boost, and now are like coming to the end of this kind of beautiful sleep by design optimization toolkit. But do either of you want to kind of talk about that like full sleep journey in how we've approached it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know what to add on top of what you've expressed. I mean, that I think thinking about everything we do holistically is super important. And I think I would love it if we, stopped thinking of just the biology of sleep. Like, oh, I need to make sure I sleep enough and I'm getting the right number for my deep sleep and my light sleep and my REM sleep. I mean, I think the smart wake up is getting into that because we're noting that even if we've slept enough, the ride out, if you time it right, is much better. Timing is everything. I mean, the same, we can relate to this in our, the consciousness of our days. You catch us at a good moment and things are great. Catch us at a wrong moment and, the angry tiger could be there. So there is an element of like finding the right moments in the wave, to give ourselves the push. So I think, thinking about the holistic toolkit, the bare minimum in my mind is the, help you get to sleep, deepen your sleep, and then wake you up at the right time. So I think that's the basics of that design your sleep architecture. So that's where it begins with that kind of those basic control points. But there is another component too that I'm passionate about, and that is every time we go to sleep, we go through this process that we get glimpses of, when we're dreaming and we remember that, we get a glimpse of this. There's a process where we are like, healing and becoming. And so there's more to sleep than just the physiology of it and did you get enough, right? Just like, with our days, there's more to our days than like,
Totally.
being awake and eating 3 meals.
Yeah.
So I think that, as we start to get into designing sleep and being wise about leveraging our sleep in all of what it gives us, it becomes very interesting. And I think, our vision with Muse is really a brain health platform, right? It's really about our overall health and performance. And it all does center around our mind and our consciousness in many ways. And so I think that, what we've done for years with meditation, when you think about the holistic relationship we have with our minds, with our emotions, sleep is an integral part of that. Obviously, it's a pillar of health. I mean, if you're not getting enough sleep, cancel all these other things, make sure you're getting enough, right? But even if you're getting enough, sleep is this amazing opportunity where, if we could actually leverage it properly, it could also help us evolve in our life the way.
What you feel passionate about and what I've heard from you, and also is like becoming a bigger area of sleep research and sleep as an opportunity for human health and brain health, is that sleep in itself is and can be a medicine and a therapeutic, right? And so it's not just about optimizing, but it's like, what does that experience mean for someone and how do you optimize it for it? However, you guys have talked about it a couple times earlier in the interview that this is not an easy thing. It's one thing to passively track sleep and be able to not disrupt an individual, and then they can wake up the next day and they can look at how they slept. And it's another thing to actively try to control or offer an intervention in someone's sleep without disrupting it, which
Mhm.
is, as you've outlined, can be very challenging, and you need the right technology in order to allow that to come to fruition. So, with this feature specifically, what was the hardest problem to solve? Like what was there something that almost didn't make this work?
Well, one thing I'd like to offer up here is that this is still R&D in many ways. We have figured out, an approach here where it's helpful, and it's really founded on knowing that there are these opportune moments for wake up. And this just comes naturally from our sleep architecture. Detecting them is super not easy because the window is very short.
Right.
But we may all not have the luxury of having enough of that window, in our schedule to be able to wait for that right moment to happen. So I think one of the challenges here is, what do you do if there's not enough time to wait for the right moment? And how do you help people from where they're at to an appropriate wake up state? And I think that we have a good approach now, which is, it is working, but there's definitely an air, like a room for improvement there because no one's really ever figured this out before. So I think if you have a big enough window, then you can wait for those right moments. And certainly having the right parameters to detect what is an appropriate time is something that we had to go through like an adventure on. And one of those questions, which is interesting, is um, our normal wake up period is often right after we dream. And if you wake someone up too close to their dreams, then you tend to carry your dream experience with you as you wake up.
Like when I was mad at Andrew because in my dream he like ate my sandwich, and then I was mad at him when I was awake.
Exactly. And
Okay.
what's quite interesting is we have this like episodic memory. It's like our memory of our dreams. And if you wait long enough, there's like someone comes with an eraser and goes like, "Du, du, 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 du," and like, scrubs it out. And you're like, "Whoop, did I have any dreams? Don't know." But like, probably, but I can't, so that happens. And so how long do you have to wait for the person to come along, go, "Du, du, du," and erase this stuff so you can wake up and not have to carry the dream baggage with you. And so that was, active area we had to play with,
Mm.
still playing with. And so we'll love user reports as we launch this to see what people are experiencing because that amount of time needed is kind of an unknown quantity. We think we're in the right ballpark and it's working, but any feedback on this is going to be super useful. But also there was an upside to this, and that is, we're quite interested also in dreaming, and a byproduct of waking someone up too close to the end of the REM cycle is you tend to remember your dreams. And so if you're interested in getting a glimpse into your dream memory as you wake up, we can dial that threshold back and we're just a bit more abrupt of when, we're bringing you out. So it's still the right kind of timing. You're finished your cycle. But if you kind of get the timing, just right there, you carry with you your dreams. And
Mm.
that's super interesting because I think, we do have a lot of our users who are interested in dreaming, interested in lucid dreaming. And there's now a lot of really exciting research around how dreams can be leveraged for our own emotional therapeutic process. How do we feel better in our days? So a whole other discussion, but it's interesting, like one of our problem areas to solve is also a feature depending on what your goals are. And so I'm quite excited about, this sort of duality of discovery.
Are we teasing that we're going to talk about dreams in a future episode, Chris?
That would be very fun.
Okay, so what I just heard from you is that, it's this window and the timing and, the longer window of opportunity someone sets, because essentially when you use this feature, you are able to set how long or short you want that window. So for example, if I'm someone who's going to bed and I really want to maximize the total time I'm sleeping, and I have the luxury of being able to do that, and I want to set my total end time at 7:30, I cannot wake up later than that, I would give the feature maybe a 60-minute window and say, use that 60 minutes to be able to wake me up at the proper time. However, for individuals who want to even maximize that even more, might say, I only want to give you 30 minutes to be able to try to wake me up and with that particular time. And kind of what you're touching on, Chris, is, the more narrow you make that window of opportunity for the feature, the more challenging it can be to ensure that it's hitting the right spot upon wake up.
Yeah.
And now, Maurice, I wonder if you can just talk quickly a little bit about what safeguards do we have in place? Because we had to think about this for deep sleep boost too, when you're in the middle of the night and you're going to have your deep sleep boost support kick in. We needed to be really sure that we weren't going to wake them up. Similarly, with Smart Wakeup, what kind of safeguards have we put into place to ensure that it's not disruptive?
That's an excellent question, Nadia. And it's also very, very important. It's important to us. It's kind of almost like a philosophy for us. Like, we want you to sleep. If you put on a Muse headband, we want you to sleep either as well as you would have slept without your muse, either better, but never worse. So this is why every feature we build, sleep assist, deep sleep, you named them, sleep assist, deep sleep boost, smart wake up, they have the same safeguards. And that is, if something looks unstable, we stop. For example, with deep sleep boost, if we detect any sign of arousals, we are going to stop the deep sleep boost stimulation. Same thing for smart wake up. If smart wake up doesn't find really a clear window where you're transitioning to that lighter sleep stage, it's going to default to the alarm that you set. And so we're redesigning the system to be conservative by design. Because Chris mentioned that is that sleep, when you're sleeping, you're very vulnerable. So people who are sleeping with the Muse, they're really entrusting us with probably one of the most important aspects of their health and their mental health. So we really take it very seriously to make sure that we do no harm to your sleep. You either sleep as good or better with Muse. Hope that kind of answers your question, Nadia.
Yeah, for sure. It's the ability to know in real time and with specificity that if there's disruption that's being detected, then it makes sure to not trigger the intervention.
Exactly.
And so, but Maurice, I think people might be curious on, like, walk us through exactly what happens. Let's say within that, I want a 30-minute wake window.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, Muse, you have between 7 and 7:30 to try to wake me up at the perfect time. How does Smart Wake Up decide when to pull the trigger?
Okay. Yeah. Good question. And let's say you go to sleep at 11 p.m. and okay, you wear your Muse. You set
So
your
late.
yeah. That's actually early
I'm
for
in
me.
bed by 10.
Oh, I wish I would go to sleep at 11 p.m.
Uh,
Usually it's around midnight for me, but yeah, so you set your alarm at 7, so you sleep at 11, wake up at 7, 8 hours. That's good. So what happens is that even during the night, the AI that's in the app is going to be reading your brainwaves and staging your sleep in real time all night. But then as you start approaching your alarm time, so let's say you have a 30-minute window, the system, the AI is going to be watching and looking for that natural transition as you transition through the lighter sleep. So we're not going to force it. So we're not going to do anything. We're just going to observe and see when you naturally, we're going to wait. You can see when you naturally go into that lighter sleep stage. And when it detects that in real time, it's going to initiate a gentle wake up sequence to help you wake up. And sometimes you might not find this window. So sometimes, in some cases, even though that happens mostly in your first few hours of sleep, sometimes you are in deep sleep towards the end of your night. So if you'll be in deep sleep throughout the entire window, in that case, we won't do anything. You just wake up at the alarm you set, which is 7 a.m. So you will never wake up later than the alarm you set. But on most nights, what's going to happen is that we're going to find a better moment for you to wake up than that 7 a.m. alarm exactly. And yeah, again, this moment is not just based on movement, even though movement does play a part, but it's really based on the real-time monitoring of your brain waves and real-time sleep stage detection.
Very cool. And then last question for Chris. Can this be used for naps?
Yes. So the same technology we're using here for waking up, you can absolutely use it for naps, but your approach to napping with it is a little bit different. So when you nap, you generally have a window of time. And depending on how
Imagine
long,
you didn't. Imagine you had the luxury of like, I'm just gonna nap for an undetermined amount of time. What bliss.
yeah, you might have trouble going to sleep at night if you do that. But so,
True.
nap with caution. But depending on how long you have to nap, there's different strategies on like how and when to wake somebody up. So napping is not a feature we've put into this first release, but it's certainly coming. And one of the challenges is just to, first of all, not overwhelm our users with too many options, because the criteria for wake ups for napping, there are many-fold depending on what your goals are. So when you nap, what tends to happen is you start to fall asleep, you go into a lighter sleep. But if you're tired, you can go into a deeper sleep, which is like kind of the no-fly zone for waking up. So, if your goal for sleep is a short one, you need to make sure you wake someone up before deep sleep. If your goal is longer, like your sleep up like window is longer, you can wait until you complete a cycle and wake them up at that natural point after the cycle's complete. But there's sort of, there's a bit of a, UX design challenge to figure out how we can bring this out in a way that's not going to be like overwhelming. The Muse application already has a lot you can do. I think that's just one of our considerations, is how do we bring all the features out and just not be too overwhelming with all the settings that you can use. I mean, I'd like to hack, right? So I love it if there are more switches that I can play with, especially when it comes to waking up, because there are so many things that you can try. So I think what we'll probably do is launch a DIY, wake up. It'll be in there, and when you go to pick up your kind of wake up experience, there's going to be one which is sort of like your sleep controller DIY version. And if you care to play with it, you'll be able to use that for napping for sure, because you'll be able to dial the settings in. So for the power users out there that are interested in exploring this, we will have something in there in the short term for you to start playing. And from our collective experience, we'll figure out how to bring out a really solid nap feature in an upcoming release.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Maurice. I'm personally very excited for this to launch and for us to get more and more user feedback so we can continue iterating.